Hello and welcome to the Sustainable Materials Management Webinar Series, a joint effort between the National Recycling Coalition and the Pennsylvania Recycling Market Center. My name is Scott Marks and I am a Program Manager for the Recycling Market Center. I will serve as the moderator today. Before we get started with the presentation, we would like to extend a special thanks to Bob Hollis of the Mobius Network for providing the webinar management software for this series. The focus of today's webinar is on tools for plastics recycling. Our presenter is Tonya Randell, whom I will introduce in a moment. Following the presentation, we will conduct a question and answer session. If you have a question or comment, please use the GoToWebinar dialog box titled Questions located in the control panel on your screen. You may also use the dialog box to request assistance if you are experiencing technical difficulties during the webinar. Please note that an edited version of this webinar will be made available for viewing via YouTube links on the National Recycling Coalition and Pennsylvania Recycling Market Center websites. The presentation slides can be obtained now using the Handouts tab on your control panel. And now I would like to introduce our presenter. Tonya Randell has worked with More Recycling since 2011. She currently serves as project manager for the WRAP Recycling Action Program, a public-private partnership to increase plastic bags and film recycling in the United States, and oversees outreach for the Plastics Recycling Terminology Project created to improve plastics outreach, data collection, and communication beyond plastics buyers and sellers. Tonya received a bachelor's degree in environmental science and policy from Duke University and serves on the board of directors for the Carolinas Recycling Association and currently lives in Chapel Hill, North Carolina with her family and pets. Tonya, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Scott, and welcome everyone. I appreciate you guys joining us for the webinar this afternoon. And there's a lot of material here because there's a lot of information related to plastics recycling. So I've broken it down for consumers, communities, and then businesses and industry. So I've let Scott know if there's a real pressing question that you have that needs a clarification as I'm working through, please make sure that you put that in the chat box. Otherwise, we'll take the rest of the questions at the end. So like I said, thank you, and here we go. So I'm just going to say that data drives all the tools that we help develop at More Recycling. We are a consulting firm to deal with all aspects of recycling of plastics, from dealing with communities and outreach all the way through to dealing with resin companies and converters and reclaimers on plastics that's being collected, the data on recycling rates and materials as they move through the value chain. And so these are just two examples. Just 2 weeks ago, we were in California sorting PET bottle bales to see really how much material, what's the yield of PET bottle bales from across the country. So that's on the left. So we do sometimes get our hands dirty. And then on the right, I've been involved with doing bag audits at grocery stores and within the WRAP program to see what kind of material gets brought back to the grocery store from consumers. So we really do depend on good data. And for communities, that's one of the things that we're really looking for, is kind of the sort of data that's being collected at the municipal level. And so this is just an overview of the plastic value chain of how materials works, in the circle and the closing of the loop from resin production with virgin material, moving through reclamation, conversion, use, purchasing, the consolidation and sorting and all that sort of stuff. And so there are various things that influence that I'm not going to go into details about in particular today because they're not necessarily related to tools, but plastics in general can be very complicated with international policies like National Sword, oil prices, that dictate how much resin costs, material quality that's being collected from communities and through MRFs, and then also consumer demand, not just at individual level, the resident's house, at a household, but also what brand companies are willing to put in, and bottles or bags or materials made with recycled content. So all of these kind of work together. And to support that, we've created a lot of tools, both as a company, but also as the consultants for trade associations to kind of help support that. So you can see that there are tools that we have directed for consumers and for communities and also for industry. And so this is what I'm going to be talking about in some detail as we move through. So to get started, consumer-facing tools, what are the things that help consumers figure out what goes in the bin? There's lots of different collections. I happen to live in a place that has only drop-off, and so we collect in my household, bottles and containers separate from glass, but I also keep my paper separate too because it's just easier. But then I also collect bags and film to take back to the grocery store. So here are some of the supports that we have for consumers. One of the key pieces that we've been working on for the last 5 years or so is the WRAP Recycling Action Program that helps consumers understand how to recycle materials like grocery bags, product overwrap from water bottles and cases of material, bubble wrap, newspaper sleeves, how that needs to go back to the retail store or a drop-off location as opposed to going in the curbside bin, because this is a star screen at the beginning of the MRF. Looks really great. It's clean and really does a great job of letting the fines fall through and letting the paper and other materials move up. And this is what happens when bags and film and other tanglers get caught in the screen, and this has to be cut out sometimes multiple times a day depending on how much material is being moved through. And so what we want to do is avoid the picture on the right. And so we want to encourage folks to take the material back to the store so that the screen continues to look like what it looks like on the left. And so to support that, we've created the drop-off directory that's been around for about 10 years, even before the WRAP program existed, wherein consumers can put in their zip code to find a local drop-off location. And it's both for the US and Canada. There's about 18,000 locations in the US and Canada. So I put in my zip code, and within about 50 miles, there's 183 locations that I could take my material back to. And so it lists them by order of proximity based on the center point to that zip code. And one of the things that I do is I help make sure that this list is as up to date and comprehensive as possible. So one of the things that we ask consumers and communities alike, and even at the state level, if you know of chains that are collecting material that we're not aware of, especially if they're small, local, regional chains that maybe only have 5 or 10 stores that maybe isn't on the radar nationally, it's really great to let me know, and we can make sure they get added. And additionally, if you know stores that have gone out of business or the location has changed or they're no longer collecting material for whatever reason, we can remove them for the drop-off directory, because we really do believe that having accurate information for the consumer is really key for them to be able to know that material is being recycled and making sure that they have an outlet for the material they do want to recycle. And along with that, we also have a lot of information and resources available on what to recycle, and specifically on plasticfilmrecycling.org, there's a whole section for consumers to really understand what we want them to recycle. And then we also have some information on, as you can see on the right, some no candy bar wrappers, chip bags, six-pack rings, degradable bags, pre-washed salad bags, some information about the things that we would like you to exclude from the curbside, from the store bin as well. And another thing that we have provided support for is foam polystyrene recycling. And so both through the plastic food packaging group from the American Chemistry Council and then some other industry support, we have created a map that shows locations around the country that both accept food service packaging or transportation packaging, which is the foam blocks and shapes that sometimes come with electronics or other packaging materials, and whether or not those are accepted at the curbside bin, which are the icons that look like recycling bins, or those that are drop-off locations that look more like the little teardrop flag type. And based on the different colors and icons, it'll let you know exactly what you can do. So again, there is a zip code search. This is for the United States and Canada as well. And for example, if you put in the zip code for Pittsburgh, you can find that the Appliance Warehouse on McCandless Avenue is willing to accept block and shape transportation packaging for drop-off. And so we don't have nearly as many locations listed. There's about 500 across the US and Canada that are willing to accept material, or communities that accept it curbside. But we are trying to make sure that this list is as comprehensive as possible. Again, if you know of a community that accepts material or has a drop-off location and it's not listed, please let us know and we'll be happy to add it to the list. And we're also trying to provide support to communities or organizations or businesses that are willing and are looking for opportunities to recycle material or want to start a collection program. We can also provide that sort of support as well. And one of the other things we do is we accept and we get a lot of email inquiries like, how do I recycle this? Where should I take it? And sometimes we get people that are kind of desperate, like the one that sits on top. How can I get a recycle place in Oklahoma City? I will do anything. Sometimes we can help, and sometimes we can't, and we do our very best to provide the best possible information on recycling, both foam and film, as we can. And the last piece that we've created specifically for consumers is the Buy Recycled Products Directory, which is a resource that we're starting to build out, that's launched over the summer, that is divided up into two sections, one for personal and household use and the other for business use, because in our minds, businesses are also consumers, but products that are made from post-consumer plastic resin, meaning either directly from the material collected from households or collected from businesses as post-commercial material, meaning that it has met its intended use, but it is not post-industrial scrap. So this is really material that is closing the loop into new products. And so we're always looking to add new products. So as you can see on the left, we show what the material is, whether it's a package or the actual material that's made out of recycled content, what percentage it is, what the resin is, and whether or not it's been third-party verified as being recycled content. And then, on the right, you can see that there's an opportunity for you to share a product if you're a consumer that you've seen that maybe we don't have listed, or if you're a company that makes recycled content materials, you can also submit a product. And like I said, we're working really hard to really flesh this out, to make it very comprehensive as something that can be used. And one of the things that we've added is making it really shareable, so that you can, if there's a product that you see that you really love, that you want to be able to share with your social networks, you certainly can. And we've made that able to do directly from the tool, from the directory. One of the things that we have not done is, it's not a shopping site. So we link directly to either the manufacturer or the site that will source the material for you or the product for you, so that you have to leave the directory to be able to purchase it. But we don't want to necessarily be a marketplace for material. We just want to be the directory that directs you to where you can buy recycled content materials.
Tonya,
And again, like I said,
I have a quick question
from
the audience.
Yes.
So the screens that you were showing that showed the drop-off locations for the various materials, do the viewers get to those from the URL you have listed in the title slide there? For instance, recycle more plastic for the one you're showing?
Yes. Exactly. Yes. And so for the one for the drop-off directory, it is on plasticfilmrecycling.org. This box sits right on the home page. And then for the foam map, recyclemoreplastic.org. And I've tried to do that throughout. So where the title might be what it is that I'm talking about, the URL that's underneath is where you would actually be able to go and find that. So that's a great question. Thanks.
And a similar question is do you have the ability to search within the site, like if you're only looking for a specific geographic region? Other than like just the zip code, can I say, like where we live here in central Pennsylvania, can I search like, within a certain mile radius of my site or something like that?
It is an interactive, especially the one for the foam map. You can, if you find, say, Pittsburgh, and then you can go in and it's an interactive map, and so you can scroll in and scroll out. So I don't know that you could put in specifically like a region, like a county name, but you certainly could pick a point that you wanted to start with, and then you should be able to zoom in and zoom out with the map using the scroll bar or the plus or minus sign to be able to zoom in to a specific region.
Great, thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. So to get back to the products directory, like I was saying, we would like you to be able to add material. Oh, we already done the sharing. So yes, so we consider businesses to be consumers too. And so we have a section that's more appropriate for commercial purchasing. For example, if you're a nurseryman or a nurserywoman and you want to be able to buy containers, here are containers for pots or for plants that you can buy, takeout bags that are made with recycled content, can liners, and then, plastic corner posts for construction or, thresholds and that sort of thing. So there's lots of materials, but we wanted to keep them segregated because not every household needs to buy this, as well as a commercial business doesn't necessarily need to look through bottles of shampoo and that sort of stuff. So again, we would love to have more materials added to the directory. And so moving on to community-facing tools, because we do really realize that communities, recycling coordinators, community organizations, KAB affiliates really are that kind of intersection between what's going on upstream within the value chain of what's being collected, dealing with contamination, and really trying to make the intersection between resident education and what's being collected through to what's actually being sent that can be recycled. And so we've really been focusing a lot of attention on making the job of educating the consumer, and to a certain degree, businesses in your area a lot easier. And so one of the things that we've done is we've made it so that you can actually customize wrap collateral to your audience, as well as brand at the bottom with your local logo and tagline or contact information. And so this just launched at the beginning of November. So you start by choosing the template. And so we've made kind of the teal, which is the standard wrap color, or a white background. And it both, you have the ability to say recycle here if you want to be able to put something on a bin that's actually for collection, versus recycle at stores because we want to be able to direct that somewhere else. And there's also tip cards. And the way that that works, and I'm happy to go through this at any depth with folks afterwards, or you have my email when we get to the end of the slides, you'll be able to contact me directly. I'm happy to help you with building out collateral or information that you may want to have. But specific to wrap and bag and film recycling, what you do is you would drag and drop what acceptable materials you want. And so it's depending on the audience you may have, you may want to have something that's more specific for maybe a college or university audience versus what might you find at the back of a store that's maybe not collecting so many bread bags, but maybe has product over wrap and shrink wrap from pallets. So you pick the images that you want. You can pick up to 10 and you drop them into the green box. And then you can also list up to 5 of your most problematic items. Again, maybe tape and receipts are more important to exclude than hangers. But if you're at a retail store, you maybe want to make sure that your staff knows that the plastic hangers don't go in with the bags and film. And then at the bottom, you put in your contact information. So you can upload your logo, then you can put in a tagline or something for your campaign, as well as your contact information. And so all of this pulls together, you save it, and then you can create a really beautiful looking collateral. So we have tip cards and posters that are available at no charge, and you can download the PDF for printing. So I would be happy, like I said, if anybody has any questions about that specifically, to be able to work you through that process. And they also, along with that, we have what's called the Roadmap to Wrap, which is a interactive support tool if you want to really be able to do a campaign to really educate on different pieces, to really help you promote plastic film recycling for municipalities and states, community organizers, and also businesses on how you want to educate. And it has 6 steps that really helps you support education campaigns. How do you pull together your partners? How do you find the funding that you need? What are your goals? And within each step, it has the information that you need and sample press releases or samples of cart tags, what the posters look like. And then you have a wrap in action, which is a case study that tells you about successes of other communities that have done this around the U.S. And so we've got the ready to use resources. For example, this is from kind of launching your campaign. So there's a questionnaire if you want to ask people how did they learn about the campaign? Are they recycling? What do they know about recycling film? How do they learn about it? And then also press releases that might be available if you want to have a launch event, what that template should look like. And then within the wrap toolbox, all of the different images and collateral and support that you can use to be able to have your campaign. And again, if you have any questions about this, please feel free to reach out to me afterwards. And then one of the last pieces that we've pulled together with wrap is we understand that recycling is a key piece of waste reduction and diversion, but also we understand that with market shifts in China, that we also really want to focus on all pieces of the market, from reducing and reusing in the very beginning, as well as recycling, which is kind of the middle step, but also preventing litter and really being mindful of plastics and the role that it has in the environment if it's not handled properly. And then going back to the Buy Recycle directory, finishing up the educational piece with letting consumers know that they do have a real role in the entire loop of recycling and buying recycled products, and that they're both the beginning and the end. And so we've started the 5 habits to handle film responsibly, and this is going to expand, I believe, outside of film recycling to really incorporate other different types of plastics, to really understand that it's not just that recycling it is the answer. It's also we want to be conscious of reducing waste and, not necessarily taking a bag, whether it's paper or plastic if you don't want one, thinking about reusables, and thinking about how different packaging actually help us reduce waste in the first place by protecting the product in transit, and being really mindful of not all packaging is terrible when it serves that purpose, but making sure that we really know how to handle it and manage it, recycling it or putting it in the garbage can if it can't be recycled, or putting it in an energy bag for waste to energy and that sort of thing. And so how all of these pieces work together. So this is something that in 2019 that we'll really be working on to expand as a tool for communities and states to be able to use to help educate on all pieces of managing our plastic waste as we move forward. And then I'm going to shift gears into more broadly plastic in general, the plastics recycling terminology and tools, which is an idea that we want to talk about all plastics, not just bags and film, and how we want to talk about what really goes in the bin, what should be excluded, and potentially what we want to divert into other places like bags, they go back to the store. And so the real goal of this project that's been going on for about, about 5 years now, is we want to increase the quality and quantity of plastics collected, but also to facilitate better tracking. So when we're talking about things in a very standardized way, it's much easier to track the data over time and across different municipalities and different states, because everybody's talking about it in the same way. And so the outreach terms are intended for recycling programs to really communicate to residents. And then the commodity terms, which I'll talk about in the industry tools, is for basically communications from the MRF through the value chain to be recycled. So what kind of commodities are you buying and selling? And so I'll start with the recycling outreach terms. And I got an email from a friend and colleague in the Chicago area that wanted me to just mention a little bit about Surma Forms, which are a real challenge, and it's not necessarily specific to any one tool, but the Terminology Project allows communities to really be able to support and educate on challenging messages. So what do you do about Surma Forms? And sometimes the very best thing that you can do is have really good imagery to support what you want to say. And so to the Surma Form question, if you're a community, make sure you're checking with the MRF that they can actually accept it. And if you don't know, have your MRF check with their buyer to make sure that that material can be incorporated into the PET bales or into the other mixed plastic bales. But in general, thermoforms can be a real challenge because they're prone to being multiple resins and having labels that are really sticky and don't come off very well. And so it's not something that it's very easy for me to have a broad brush to say, yes, they're in, or no, they're not, or to even have education be particularly easy. But I do think that with the right amount of special education around thermoforms, I think you can do a really great job to direct folks in the way that you want them to. So we do have images within the gallery that are unbranded and they're free to use to help support that. So again, feel free to reach out to me at the end if you have questions specifically about that. But one of the things that we really want the Plastics Terminology Project to do is to really help streamline plastic education and to move away from the reliance on numbers, because that is where a lot of the confusion comes, because there are a lot of plastics that have numbers that really don't have very good recycling markets or any markets at all. And then there are definitely materials that don't work well in single stream collection. So sometimes you want to divert that somewhere else. And so if you rely just on numbers, that sometimes a consumer sees a number and puts it in, even though you don't necessarily want it. And so as you can see with these two examples, there are really long lists of bullets that have a lot of information. And what the Recycling Terms and Tools Project can really help is to really pull them into very distinct groups of plastics that are alike. For example, tubs and lids, and then the soda, water, and drink bottles, household food and jars. And then we have images that support that. And so what you would do is you would work through the program builder to choose your acceptable materials. the not acceptable materials that you want in your, that you don't want in your program, and then any special instructions on how to handle those. And then you can use the image gallery to pull that in and create your own flyer with other materials if you want, or you can use the customizable tool that we've also just relaunched to make very specific plastics related information. And then there's also definitions as you're working through to know exactly what we mean. And then there's testimonials that you can read about other communities and the successes that they've had by making the switch to very clear, concise messaging about plastics and the images. And then there's also technical assistance from from the MORE staff to be able to help you create the materials that actually meet your needs and that are really clear. And so the way that this works is through the outreach builder on the left. You'll see the things that you've picked. In this case, I've picked plastic bottles and jars. I want non-food containers and packaging, plastic toys, and plastic flower pots. And then here are the notes that I want to be able to include as instructions, and the materials that I want to exclude, like no hazardous product containers, no frozen food bags, no foam, for example. And then there's the image gallery that supports all of those different images that you can pull into. And then within that, there's the customizable template that's available, very similar to the wrap templates. There are 4x9 size, which are sized to be bill inserts, so they'll fit in envelopes. You can also convert that into a cart tag or a handout. And then there's 8.5x11 that's slightly larger. And you can both have a section, if you see kind of the coral pink stripe on the left-hand side, those allow you to put in your exclusions, and then the ones that are on the right, the four that are on the right, have special program notes. So if you don't necessarily want program images for your exclusions, you can also just put in more program details. So there's a lot of opportunity to really customize this in the way that you want. And again, you'll pick a headline at the top. For example, this one says Save the Day, Recycle. And then the subheading, which is just at the top in the blue as well, pulls in all of those specific items that I picked: the bottles and jars, the non-food containers, the food, the toys, and the flower pots. And then, as you can see in this kind of turquoise blue section, you'll be able to see all of the different images that fit what I've picked. And then I drop them into this grid on the right-hand side. And it will resize the images to fit within the boxes so that you actually end up with a really finished, polished graphical design that you can print. The special instructions show up in green. Those are the notes that I picked on how I want material to be handled. The not accepted materials, the text pulls in directly from what you pick in the tool, and then there is a spot for images that you can insert as well that get drag and dropped into that. And then at the bottom in the gray box is, again, your contact information and your logo. And because both the wrap tool and the terms and tools customization tool are built on the same platform, once you've logged into one with your email address, all of the information that you've picked as far as your contact information will be held, and you can move between the two of them. And so the images aren't necessarily the same, but it will hold your contact information so that you can move between them and build materials to support both what goes in the bin as well as what can be taken back to the store. And again, this is kind of an example of the different flyers and inserts that we have available and how they look when they actually get converted to PDF. And then lastly, we have the community testimonials from Columbia, South Carolina, Allegheny County, Wisconsin, and Greensboro, North Carolina, that talk about the success that they've had as far as making the changes to using descriptive terms and using really good imagery to educate. And this is just a quote that basically says, residents are really happy with our education program, and they really understand better what recycling is and isn't. And the last section that I'm going to do is the industry-facing tools, which is support for businesses and recyclers and material in MRFs and organizations and companies that are collecting material for recycling. And so one of the key pieces that we have is plasticmarkets.org, which allows you to buy or to look for buyers or suppliers of materials. You can search by resin, you can search by company, you can search by material form, whether it's baled or loose. And we also have a historical scrap plastic pricing trend data that's available on the homepage as well. And the way that it works, that you can put in a search, either a phrase or a specific company in the top, and it'll show you all the different companies that meet that search. For example, this is a buyer of LDPE film and then you get the list of companies, and then the little icons tell you whether or not they accept truckload quantities, less than truckload quantities, or if they buy mixed loads, and then whether or not they're actually making a pellet or post-consumer resin out of that might actually be available for buying as well. And so also to support industry and recycling within the value chain is the What, Who, and How series. For right now, it's just film, but we're also working on foam case studies. It's basically an understanding of how materials get recycled through the value chain, starting with education and collection, moving through consolidation, the reclamation process, and then end users, and how that all works together. Obviously, this is a map of a city that's not necessarily realistic, but it kind of does show how the different pieces work together. And recycling at work and home is kind of outside of the chain in some ways, but sometimes it does start with you going to the grocery store to drop off material, and then also sometimes outside the MRF, especially in the case of film, that the material moves in a cycle away from the MRF and doesn't necessarily go through there at all. And we have individual case studies with specific details. So for example, this is Price Chopper, which is a grocery store in the Northeast that works as a consolidation point because they're backhauling material from their local stores to the distribution center, as well as collecting material from the distribution warehouse, sending material out to the stores. And, it gives you some information about what they do. For example, they collect about 500,000 pounds of low density film just from the warehouse every year, but they also are collecting about 2 million pounds total, meaning that about 1.5 million pounds is coming back through consumers and other mixed film that's coming through the stores. And so, this can show you kind of some of the successes that we're seeing within film recycling. And again, like I said, we're going to be working on case studies for foam as well. And so also with the terms and tools, like I mentioned before, there's commodity terms that really help talk about the different sorts of commodities that are available. It's based on the APR bale specifications, and it really helps streamline communications about buying and selling plastics that have been collected. And so this is HDPE colored bottles. The arrow has shifted up a little bit. It's actually supposed to be with the colored bottles, obviously, because they have a lot of color. But this is what it means. They're pigmented or opaque. They've got with a neck or a mouth, and this is what a bale looks like when you're buying and selling that. So that way, when you're talking about it on one end of the phone and you're selling it to someone or trying to purchase it from someone else, you know exactly what they're talking about. And then plastic recycling reports. This is one of the pieces that more recycling does. Every year, and we've been doing for probably about 15 years for some of the different commodity types, is we do an annual survey, and from that we write a report. And the 2017 PET bottle report, we provided the data to NAPCOR, and that was just released this fall. But the 2017 non-bottle rigid film and bag, and then the Canadian report will also be coming out in January or early February as we use that. And so here are all the reports that we have. You can go to morerecycling.com, click on News and Media in the upper right, and you can see all of the different reports that we have available. It's very light reading. If anybody's really interested in knowing a lot about plastics and recycling and how it's collected and what it's made into, strongly encourage you to read them. They're actually quite interesting. They're a little dense sometimes, so but I do think it's very informative information. And what we're able to do is we take that data from the plastic survey, and we can then generate the data that the different trade associations and the EPA and various other entities can use for recycling rates or to follow trends. And as you can see, it's a pretty evenly mixed collection of plastics that are collected for recycling in the U.S. Of the 6 billion pounds that we tracked in 2016, you can see, just over 30% was for PET, and about 20% was HDPE, and then the other half was split pretty evenly between non-bottle rigids and film. And then within that, we're able to do some pretty significant, breakouts of estimated bits of what those individual, especially for non-bottle rigids, what that means. And then what you can see on the left is we also track, what's been segregated by resin versus what's mixed, and then how that gets moved through the different pieces. And so, having consistent data, what I was talking about earlier with the terms and tools, is being able to then track things very clearly over time. This is the last 10 years of information. So knowing that things are called the same year in and year out, and we're speaking the same language about the different commodity types, but it's exactly the same year in and year out, allows us to watch and track trends over time about what's being collected. And then also it really highlights market needs. And this is a slide that I like to use, in my market reports as well, is that if you look, the green bars are mixed resins. So most of that material was exported, and this is through 2016, so before National Sword. And these were the kinds of materials that were being exported to China and that we're struggling to find homes for now, because there's not the capacity or the infrastructure to necessarily sort these well. But you can see anything that was orange that was further segregated by resin into PET or polyethylene had a much better chance of staying in the U.S. and really wasn't exported. And so it allows us to see that sometimes, the infrastructure needs are there to really help support collection and keeping things in the United States. And one of the things that we also do is a quarterly data sort within the plastic recycling update. And as you can see, what we did is a kind of a deep dive into how much recycled content you could use in trash bag production. So if every trash bag in the United States used some amount of recycled content, which is on the far left, the percentage, it would tell you, the second column from the left, how much of the resin that you would need. And then what portion of that, so that's the third column, of the total amount that's presently being collected and recycled, and then how much metric tons of CO2 equivalent that you could avoid. So for example, the third row down says 30% PCR would use 1.8 billion pounds of all of the polyethylene, in the United States, which is 95% of polyethylene that's being collected for post-commercial and post-consumer use. Meaning that you could virtually use every bit of polyethylene, whether it's bottle or film, in just one application if 30% of all of the garbage bags were made with recycled content instead of being 100% virgin. And so that's the kind of information that we use and tools that we provide that really help industry and policymakers make decisions about moving forward with various things. And so this is going to be a quick recap of the different websites that'll be available in the PDF. So plasticfilmrecycling.org provides information for consumers on the drop-off directory and what to recycle, and then for communities on the roadmap to wrap, and then the customizable tool. We also have print-ready collateral if you don't necessarily want to put your logo or branding on there, that you can just also download for use. RecycleMorePlastics.org has the Buy Recycled Products directory and the polystyrene access map for consumers. It has the plastic recycling terms and tools and the customizable tool for that within communities, and then within industry, the what, who, and how case study for film. And then plasticmarkets.org is primarily for industry. It's companies buying and accepting commodities, including lower grades, the pricing charts, and then also companies selling PCR resin. And then I also wanted to mention that APR, the Association of Plastics Recyclers, also has a really great website that has tools and information available, both toolkits for containers, keeping the caps on, and residential bulky collection, as well as for businesses and industry about the Recycling Demand Champion that is encouraging companies to commit to using more PCR in their products. And that's it. Here's my email address. So I encourage you to email me with any specific questions that you may have about any of these tools. And so, Scott, I think that's it. I think we're ready for some questions.
Sounds good. I do have a couple queued up here, and should any of the other attendees think of some questions as we're discussing these, please feel free to type them in, and we'll go ahead and get to those when we're done with these. So the first question I have is from an attendee, and they think that the plastic non-food containers and packaging comes across as a little vague and confusing. Can you talk about how you choose those terms? Like, what's your methodology for deciding on how to describe something?
Yeah, so what we've done within that terminology project is we pulled together a industry group from communities through the MRFs, through reclaimers, those companies that are accepting, that are buying recycled material, the converters. And we really came to terms with, kind of it's, I guess, a spectrum. So it starts out with bottles. and then it moves through bottles and containers, bottles and jars, and then various things. And so non-food containers and packaging isn't intended to be used ever kind of by itself. It kind of falls into a, starting at the least inclusive, maybe just PET and HDPE bottles. And then the most inclusive would be plastic, that you're willing to take anything. And so as you build on that, the non-food containers and packaging fall into that. And so that's where the image gallery really comes into play. So you may already have soda bottles, water bottles, juice bottles, peanut butter jars, perhaps a food container that held salad dressing or something like that. And then when you get into the non-food, maybe you'll have something like a bathroom cleaner or a shampoo bottle that also falls into that place. And so they're really intended to go together, that you wouldn't necessarily use the terminology by itself without an image that helps support that.
All right, thank you very much. The next question that I have is if thermoforms are problematic for plastic processors, why do MRFs include them as acceptable in their programs?
So, that's a great question. And because some MRFs are able to sort those optically, so they can sort them into the different resins, and then they have buyers that are willing to accept the thermoforms in their PET bales. And so what we know from the bale sorts that we do is the amount of thermoforms that are collected is really a small part of a PET bottle bale, and most of it is really bottles and containers, whether it be soda bottles or water bottles or food containers like peanut butter jars. And so there are some MRFs that really can accept it and they really can move it. But the real challenge is not just at the MRF level, it's also at the design for recycling level, wherein the labels are really hard to get off and they become problematic. So even if you can sort them properly, the material can be a real challenge. And so sometimes it's to get to the real question, and the real answer is that sometimes the MRFs are not having very good conversations with their buyers, and there's not enough back and forth on what should be accepted, what should be excluded, and that doesn't necessarily trickle down to the community as well. So I would say thermoforms are one of the biggest challenges within recycling right now, because they are ever present and a lot of consumers have them and they're not exactly sure what to do with them, because communities and MRFs and reclaimers aren't exactly sure what to do with them either. So I think that this is something that both APR and NAPCOR are working through to be able to provide better guidance on, as they get a better handle on what are the real challenges and then how to address them and how to deal with them.
Well, and communication is certainly important between the MRFs and the processors and the plastics buyers and so forth. And you see those same sorts of problems across all materials, certainly not unique to plastic. So the next question I have here is, the attendee says, recently Moore, meaning you guys, presented an excellent article on the average breakdown of plastics in a 3 to 7 bale. Looking at the recoverability of the breakout on the polymers in this bale, it appears that 53% is not recoverable. Was this the dilemma that caused China's import bans on plastic coming from the US?
So I'm bringing back up this estimated breakout of bales. I would say yes and no. There's a lot of plastic that is currently not recyclable, but that also serves a really great purpose. So I'm thinking about pouches, for example, because the amount of material that you don't have now by having an alternative material like cardboard or paper or steel as a container, what's the life cycle analysis and the overall sustainable materials management viewpoint for that pouch, even though it's maybe not recoverable at the moment, versus what might be happening in 5 years, and the different cost of carbon, the greenhouse gas emissions related to something that might be heavier. So that's one piece of it. But I do think that the 3 through 7 bale, it's always been a challenge because it's a mix of all sorts of materials. And so it's not just that material wasn't recoverable. We also know that the real challenge with that is that there were materials that were being put in that weren't plastic at all. And I think we're also seeing the flip side of that, is plastic being in with fiber bales. And, one of the things that's a real challenge is the infrastructure to be able to properly sort single stream material and getting that into bales that actually meet specifications. And so I think the larger challenge for China was that we were sending them bales that weren't meeting bale specifications, and they really did have a lot of debris and garbage and material that were not plastics. And it's not just the 3 through 7 bales. It was true of PET, it was true of HDPE, it was true of film collection, it's true of fiber bales. And I think that they're also really trying to support their own domestic reclamation industry as well. And so they want to really be able to have an outlet for their own internal feedstocks. And so I think it was a combination of a lot of things. I can tell you from the PET bale sort that we did 2 weeks ago, a lot of those bales that were supposed to be just PET bottles had a lot of aluminum cans in them. They had a lot of non-PET plastics that could be recovered and used for other materials. And a lot of them had a lot of what I would call just straight out garbage. They had newspaper debris. They had a lot of dirt and grime as well. So, seeing them up close makes me realize that it's not surprising that someone would say that they didn't want that to be imported into their country.
All right. And we have one last question. And this attendee noted that you mentioned no chip bags. Do you foresee the opportunity to recycle these types of plastics in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, they're going again to the pouches and things like chip bags and multi-laminates and different sorts of, containers and packaging that serves a really important role as a package. For example, chip bags are metallized because they help keep the chips fresh, and there's a whole purpose of keeping them fresh and not stale, because that's the consumer experience, and we want to have our chips be fresh even after the bag's been open for a while. And so industry, especially the American Chemistry Council and APR and some of the brand companies that are really forward thinking sustainability, want to make sure that their packages are recyclable or recoverable. So I think that there is a lot of movement towards picking out these packages that maybe don't have a recycling end use at the moment, and really working on how to make adjustments so that they can be accepted for recycling. Do we recover them for waste to energy or chemical recycling and those sorts of things? So I think that that's the way that we're moving. And I think a lot of materials that are like a chip bag are going to be something that'll be collected in the coming years. And I think it's definitely the way that the industry is moving at the moment, because we don't want packaging that can't be recovered somehow, because then that's just, it's just a waste. But we also understand that packaging serves a really important role in protecting the products that they hold as well. So it's a balance between keeping fresh and keeping secure the products being sold, and actually being able to capture and recover the package itself.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I did have one more question come in while we were speaking. How do you recommend educating about black plastics?
So black plastic is a real challenge for most MRFs. And so I don't think it's a bad idea, and this is kind of my personal opinion, just from what I know, that you exclude it, because there's a lot of different types of resin that go into black plastic. APR does not consider it as a recyclable plastic at the moment. They are definitely working on technology that maybe can sort it, but definitely the current optical sorters with near infrared can't see black, and they can't sort it by resin. And so I think there's a real challenge with it as a particular type of material that's being captured and being used for consumer goods. And so I tend to recommend that it's not really something that you would try to collect unless you know for certain that your MRF has a way to manage that, because we do know that the infrared is absorbed by the black pigment, and it doesn't really get sorted very well.
Right. Another question popped in, Tonya. This attendee says that they're starting to see PET clothing in the bales. Do you foresee any education you can provide to the public or MRFs?
I think that's a great question. I think the idea of textile recycling going in the bin is a challenge that a lot of folks are seeing. And so I think it's kind of the same way that you would want to talk about the bag and film recycling of PET clothing is definitely not like a PET bottle or even a thermoform. So I think it's definitely one of those things of what goes in the bin and then addressing how to manage the things that go outside of the bin. And so I think a strong exclusion of no textiles, but you can take them here is the best way to go as far as educating. But we can certainly, if that attendee would like to reach out to me specifically, I can see if there's anything I can do to help with any specific information or imagery or details that might be able to help if they have a specific program or issue in mind.
Okay. So no more questions. So why don't we go ahead and wrap up here. Again, this webinar, like all the webinars in this series, have been recorded and will be available via YouTube on both the National Recycling Coalition and Recycling Markets websites. Thank you again for joining us. We hope you will join us in next month's webinar. Please visit the NRC and RMC websites for schedule updates. And I want to extend thanks to you, Tonya, for presenting today. I'd also like to thank all of the attendees who took a little time out of their day to attend and participate in our webinar. And I hope everyone has a fantastic holiday season. Thank you.
Thanks.